We're so glad you're here. Welcome.
Okay, so we've got a wide range of grade levels and experience, so hopefully we can really learn from each other today.
If you'd like to follow along with our slides, you can see that in the chat too.
All right, so as you all are continuing to introduce yourself, figured we can go ahead and get started. Is that okay, Glenda and Shannon?
Definitely, let's go.
Perfect.
So I'm Shannon Fratto. I'm a kindergarten teacher.
I'm Glenda Craig. I'm a first grade teacher.
And I am Sylvia Grillette, a fifth grade teacher.
Today we're going to be talking about building trust and positive relationships.
Okay, thank you everybody for taking the time today. We really appreciate your dedication to your students. We're working with you on building relationships in our classrooms, with our teacher teams, and in our communities. Here's the table of contents to kind of overview what we're working on today. And we share the slides with you. There's a lot of information and not as much time. So you can go over this with a slower pace after our meeting today. So let's jump right in with building relationships with your students in the classroom. The easiest thing that you can do to start is by greeting each child by name as they enter the classroom. You can use a poster like this, but you don't need the poster. All you need is your beautiful smile and really good eye contact to let those children know that you see them and that they are important to you and that you're glad that they're there on each day. We can also take all the information that they share with you. They love to share their personal stories about their pets and their families, but it's like too much for us to remember. So it's a really good strategy to write it down, keep a notebook. And it feels kind of funny at first, especially in the beginning of the school year when you really don't know the children, to be like writing down information about them. But what you end up with is this like great wealth of resources that you can use when you're planning lessons or to build connections and build relationships. And it also helps you keep track of who are you missing? Who did you not build a connection with yet? Or who hasn't shared anything with you yet? And that can be your reminder, oh, I need to check in with that student. That little notebook will also be really helpful in November when we do parent-teacher conferences. If you can show that you really know the children, that really builds trust with the families. Let's look at developing and celebrating individual identities. This is another biggie. Maybe you already did a PLC session all about this, but taking the time to choose your lessons carefully and to choose materials that reflect the students' identities goes so far in helping them to be seen and appreciated. The last bullet here, using descriptive language instead of evaluative language, is so powerful and was a huge game changer for me. So we're going to take some time to practice it together. But it's this idea that you can replace some of your evaluative statements. You know, that's the cheerleading, like, good job, way to go. You can sometimes replace those statements with a very simple observational description of what the children are doing. So, you know, as teachers, we want to like build up our students. We want to cheer them on. We want to give them the greatest self-esteem that we can. But when we overuse those evaluative statements, what happens is the children kind of become numb to it. It loses its authenticity. And it really centers the teacher in the room as the person who's like doling out judgment and holding a carrot stick. Like, is she going to say good job to me? But when you hold that back, the children are in charge of evaluating themselves and cheering on themselves. So let's look at some examples to see what that would sound like in the classroom. So it might sound like, Glenda, you're an incredible artist. There it is, the cheerleader praise. And that's good and useful sometimes. But this descriptive praise can be even more powerful. Glenda, I see you coloring the pumpkin orange. And then it leaves it to her to say, oh yeah, I am following the directions, or I like how I drew my pumpkin. This one is a big one that I'm guilty of. Sylvia, you're sitting so beautifully on the rug. But if we stop and think, like, what does that even mean? How can I sit beautifully? What a descriptive way to say it would be, I see your bottom is on the rug. I see your eyes are looking right at this page. And that leaves it then to Sylvia to say, oh yeah, I am really focusing right now. I'm an awesome student. There's a few more examples there that we can look at, but I also want to mention that this strategy is the most powerful for children who, for whatever reason, they are in the habit of always trying the negative behavior to get that little hit of teacher attention. You know, when you use this with them, you just say, oh, I see you walking in the room. Immediately they know, oh, my teacher sees me, and I don't have to resort to the negative behavior to get that attention. So when you're looking at these examples, you may notice that the descriptive praise, all of our examples start with the sentence starter, I see. And you don't have to start that way. In the last session, I notice also came up as a really good way to start your descriptive praise. It's just a nice thing to keep in your mind, especially when you're trying to move away from always defaulting to the evaluative praise. So let's look at the next slide, and we're going to give you an example of evaluative praise. Good job. You're a great math student. I want you to, in the chat, rewrite this in using a descriptive praise lens. So we're going to take out the part where we're judging and saying what is good and what maybe not be so good, and just to describe what you would see the child doing if they're like totally on the ball during math class. Excellent. I see you labeled your tape diagrams. I noticed that you're counting the bears in an array. Also, that's a great opportunity to insert like your math vocabulary that you want the children to use when they're discussing. I see you're using the make 10 strategy. I see you wrote out your thinking. Great examples. I noticed that your number bonds makes 10, and this group is killing it. Last time we had a few mix in the evaluative statements, but you all are doing a really nice job of removing that part and letting the child fill it in and become their own cheerleader. Great. So those will keep rolling in. Let's keep moving on to our next slide. So we know children need to be seen, but we also know that children want to feel like they're part of a team. So you can include teamwork in your class management systems, and instead of having the children work towards a reward on an individual basis, you can have them work together, and this is encouraging them to cheer each other on, encourage each other, and work as a team. You can use a class name or a class chant. This also goes for that feeling of like we belong together and we're a group. We have this group identity of our classroom. Including class photos in the classroom is really nice too. The children love to see themselves, and giving them opportunities to actually work on the physical environment. So I included this beautiful example of our class as a family chart. A teacher in my school has this hanging right by her door. The children in her class each contributed their idea of how they will take care of their class family. And so when they come in the morning, that's the first thing they see. How have I made a commitment to my class family, and how is my class family committed to taking care of me? It's a really nice example. And of course, we have the marble jar there as an example of a team management system. So when you're trying and really focusing on having everything be positive relationships, you might think, okay, everything's always going to be wonderful. Everything's hunky-dory. But no, actually, there's some really hard parts of building that relationship, because children need to feel safe. And for some children, that means pushing you to find where your boundary is for whatever type of behavior they're trying out. And for those children, they find the adults who they trust based on who will set the boundary in a loving, caring way, but who is going to hold me accountable. And then for some kids, after they find it and you hold the boundary, they're good for a while until they have to test again. But that's totally normal. So you set and hold those boundaries even when it doesn't feel so happy and fun. Children also need clear routines. So when children have the established routine and they know what to expect, they know what's coming next, it's easier for them to relax and focus on learning. Children need to feel safe making mistakes in your classroom. So I don't have to pretend I make mistakes all the time. And I just say, whoops, I made a mistake. And I model what to do when you make a mistake. And I model how to respond when one of the students makes a mistake. So basically, the children are testing to see you are the captain of the ship and you're not going to let us sink. So let's go to the next slide and talk about what happens after there might be some sort of upsetting holding of boundaries, right? So maybe a child's having a hard day. It's really important to maintain dignity for the child. You call them aside to correct some behaviors, and really the first question is, are you okay? How can I help you? You can't control the children's behavior. You can't control the fact that they want to test those boundaries. You can only control your reaction to it. And what you do will set the tone. You'll either escalate or de-escalate. And that's hard. It's hard to always stay in control. And you have strategies that you can use. You might take deep breaths. So I like to, in the moment when it's happening, when I start feeling frustrated with a student, I model it out loud for all of my students to hear. Ooh, my cheeks are getting hot and my heart is beating fast. I need to stop and take some deep breaths. And you show them what that looks like. And they can see you calming down. And you'll notice that the children will start to mimic you and use those same strategies during other times in the day when they are in a frustrating situation. And then the last little tip I'll give you is this 1 to 3 rule, which is not a hard and fast rule. It's just like a mind trick that I use for myself, that for every time I do have to hold a child to their boundary or somebody loses their patience, either me or the child, I try to give 3 chances for a positive experience before the day ends. I let them lead the game, or I let them come and sit by me in my back table and read a story together. Just it's something to keep in mind to help you remember that you can always rebuild that relationship. So Sylvia's up next with another great strategy of morning meeting, and I hope this is really helpful.
All right. Hi, everyone. So I will be talking about morning meeting, the components and purpose of it. And so when we're thinking about morning meeting, starting it first thing in the morning, it's really to help build that or establish even that positive start to the day. Students really look forward to morning meeting, and with it being like first thing in the morning, that really kind of gets them excited to start the day and they don't want to miss it. And so it really helps improve that attendance as well. It creates that calm of knowing what to expect. Every day starting with morning meeting, they know the components, which we'll talk about in the next slide. And it's a great way for them to kind of be given a heads up of what to expect each and every day. Because I don't know about you all, but although I have my schedule posted on my whiteboard, sometimes students don't always look at it. And so morning meeting is a great opportunity for them to kind of see what's to come. And it, of course, provides that equitable experience for all students. And that's a big, big thing that we want to talk about in our classrooms. And so there are 4 sections of a morning meeting. The first one is the greeting. This is an opportunity for students to practice their names. I know sometimes with greetings, I might have a silent greeting where they're just like whispering to each other or just like saying hi or giving a fist bump or a high five. And it's just a fun way for them to practice greeting each other. The second component is sharing. And this is really a great opportunity for students to, yes, practice their speaking, listening, making comments, asking questions. I have a poster in my classroom titled Active Listening, and we always refer back to the active listening because as 5th graders, they have a lot to say, a lot to talk about, and sometimes it's kind of in between when someone else is sharing. And so I might use that as an opportunity to be like, oh, I see, going off of, what Shannon said, I see that so-and-so is actively listening. I see that their eyes are on the speaker. I see that their voices are off. So really kind of having the students practice that active listening during sharing is a huge benefit as well. The third component is activity. And this is the fun part too, where students get to engage in different activities and just learn about their classmates. In the first few days of the school year, I did an activity called Me Too. And my students went around and said something about themselves, and other kids, if it applied to them, jumped in and said, me too. So maybe if it was, oh, I have a dog, and then other students who had dogs jumped in that circle and said, me too. I had a student share that they have 2 moms. And I love that it provided, and this was in the very beginning of the year, It was a way for us to learn about our peers and as a teacher, learn about your students as well and kind of learn more about their home life too. And the comfort that they had in sharing that was just blew me away with that. So those are just some examples of activity. And then the last one is news and announcements. And this is really important too, to kind of sum up your whole morning meeting. It's an opportunity for the students to learn about the day ahead. I have on the next slide that we'll go through different examples. And so I really use that message to lay out the day. Because like I said, sometimes my students don't look to the right of the board and see the schedule. So I'll have it right there on the Promethean board for them to see. And if there's quizzes coming up or field trips coming up or things that are due, I'll put that all in that morning message and I'll read it all with them. And yes, just like Shannon said, it's an opportunity to build that safe space. Like that's something you really want to encourage in your classroom, that this space here is safe. We respect each other. I have a sign in the back that says we are family, going off of what Shannon mentioned too. And it's important for the kids when they come in to just feel like what they're sharing is valued, it's respected, and that our differences, of course, are what makes our classroom our classroom. Sorry, Glenn, I think I accidentally asked you to unmute. And so just an example of greeting. Mr. and Miss, and I know too, depending on how your student identifies, that may be something that you want to keep in mind too. But I know that as a fifth grade teacher, I'm thinking ahead to also our fifth grade promotion, where I will present my students with their certificate. And I have to say their first and last name. And I want to make sure that I have a lot of students from different cultures and different backgrounds. And I want to make sure that I'm practicing how to say their last names, because it's always my first goal to get their first names down correctly, but their last names can be very tricky. And so I use this as a greeting, and I was very honest with my students. I'm like, I need to practice your last names. And so they're helping me through it. And it's just a way for them to see too, that's like, I find their last names just as important. I'm trying and I want to learn, especially with the accents too. I may not have the accent, but I'm going to keep trying until I say their last names correctly. And then it's just a fun way for students too, to just greet each other. The next example that I have here is sharing. What is one thing you would change about the world? And just different questions that they have, or what's one thing that you're looking forward to growing up? What's one job that you can have? If you had $20, what would you do? It's just so many different questions that open up to how your students are thinking. And it really gives that opportunity, going back to what Shannon said, to create that safe space. As more and more students share, so I don't necessarily have all my students share because they don't really want to. Some days I might have others who maybe haven't. Other days I'll have those who are kind of consistently sharing. And I encourage them to share, but it's so great to see that as they see more of their peers sharing, they're feeling more comfortable in the classroom to share what's on their mind. And sometimes, as fifth graders, they'll kind of give us some silly, funny responses, we'll laugh about it. I'm like, okay, so we'll go on to the next one, or like, come back to this, because sometimes they kind of go off topic a little bit. And so like Shannon mentioned, we want to make sure that we're steering them to that right direction and staying on topic with that. The third one is activities. So charades is something that my students love to do. And I usually started off with, something, I act out something that we do in school, and then whoever guesses what I'm trying to act out correctly, they will then lead it on. And so this is something that in the past has led to like 3 or 4 days straight. So it's like less prep for me to have to change the activity, but it's also something that they enjoy doing. And so like I mentioned earlier, the other one was Me Too, 2 Truths and a Lie. We did that in the beginning of the year too, to again, learn more about our students and to learn more about each other. But it's also, again, just that fun time where they can just enjoy the time in the morning before the instruction comes in. And this is an example of usually what I include in my message. So again, I kind of just go happy, 30th day of school, because today would have been. And then I always say, hope you had a wonderful day yesterday. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. I give them an overview of our schedule. So today we'll do this, and then we're going to switch for this. But again, if there's fire drills that day, if there are assemblies that day or quizzes coming up, I will include all of that in the morning message, and I will read this with them. And then I always end off with, let's have an amazing day and an amazing start to week 9. Because it's also kind of like, as we're building these routines and relationships in our classrooms, sometimes I might say to my students, wow, it's only been the 8th week of school, but you all are doing such an amazing job at this. I see, going off of Shannon's, I see, us quietly transitioning and quietly lining up. So to kind of connect it back to, how long we've been together too. And so that was my section on morning meeting. Hopefully there were some takeaways with that. And I will turn it over to Glenda.
Hi, everybody. Also, I do want to mention that all of these resources are linked in the last 2 slides of our presentation. And what Sylvia snipped for examples, there's tons of PowerPoints that you can pick from. So that way you don't have to recreate the wheel. So, hi, I'm Glenda Craig. I'm going to be talking about building trust in team relationships. So, sometimes it feels like our whole classroom's on fire. There's a lot of competing priorities in our career. And sometimes it can be overwhelming because we make overwhelming change and it's a lot. So we're going to be talking about how to use your team as a resource and how to build trust with your team. So Patrick Lencioni is a researcher that discusses the 5 dysfunctions of a team and why these dysfunctions reveal that we need to have trust as our foundation of our work. We need trust with our colleagues, we need trust with our students, we need trust with our families. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about trust with your teammates and your colleagues. And you can watch this video on your own. I'm not going to play it right now, but it just discusses the research behind it. This is a graphic that goes along with Patrick Lencioni's work of the 5 dysfunctions of team. As you can see, if there's an absence of trust, it instills a fear of conflict, which has a lack of commitment, helps us avoid accountability, and then we don't pay attention to it results. So as you can see, it's a good inference that we need this trust at the base of our teams and our communities. So that way we can move on in a more positive light, more productive manner. So today we're going to talk about one very effective way to build trust within your team. So the question I'm going to ask you is, what information do we need to guide our team along their trust journey? One thing our school has done for the last 6 years is the core values inventory. The core values inventory is a set of values and it helps you understand your team better. So we're going to just get our feet just a little wet for this. We're going to take a little sneak peek into it. Please know that I took 4 different planning sessions of the first 5 minutes to do this activity with my team. So it usually takes at least a half hour in all to do this with your team. We're only going to spend a little bit of time. So please look in the chat. You're going to see it's going to take you to the core values exercise. And the list can be a little overwhelming, but please don't, it's not like it defines you today. So we know you're not limited to just the 3 core values, but if you could please look over the list and decide, what do I value? I value faith, growth, and empathy. Those are my 3 core values. So take a moment. I'll give you like 2 minutes or so, and please put in the chat your 3 core values that drive you as a person and as an educator. Faith, trust, compassion, respect, sensibility, and empathy. Balance, communication, empathy. Trust, balance, competence. Knowledge, growth, honesty. Now, when you're sharing these with your team, we share it aloud at my team. Some teams record them. You'll see in my resource linked at the last part of our slides. You can record them for reference to look back onto. It's up to you and your style as a team, but This is a wonderful conversation to have as your team to help you better understand your teammates. And it helps later on when conflicts arise to really understand who you're working with and what drives them. So now that you've gotten your feet just a little wet, we're going to go into our Padlet. And I'd like for you to please add your why. So now that we've looked at what your core values are, what is the why that drives you behind your work as an educator? I'm going to throw the little link into the chat. And I'd love for you to please write what drives you as an educator. You'll see from our last session, there's some input already in there, and we'll give you 2 more minutes to list your why that drives you as an educator.
Even just seeing the work of the previous session is so powerful and, gives me warm fuzzies and is motivating in itself.
This is a wonderful activity to do. The trust inventory and the core values inventory is really good to do with your team in the very beginning of the year. Every year I've worked on the same team for 9 years, and we always have different people joining. And some years we have, 1 new teammate or so. We're a pretty big team, but it's so important to remotivate you, get you excited, really reflect on your purpose as an educator. And then it helps you get to know each other and break some, ice. So one person said helping students feel comfortable to take risks drives them. Having a safe environment, comfortable learning, creativity, community, and growth helps this person. Her drive is to have an ability to think flexibly and problem solve academically and socially. I love that so many of these are focused on the future too.
I have goosebumps officially.
So I'm going to keep that Padlet open, but please know that, again, this practice takes usually in total 30 to 45 minutes. I know in ILT, we took an hour of our ILT session to really pare down our 10 core beliefs to our 3 and discuss them. So please use this resource as you see fit. It is a wonderful resource to establish community on your team and trust with your team. So I'll keep that Padlet open for you. So another portion I want to discuss to help build trust is self-management. If you can self-manage better, then you'll have more capacity to help others on your team. So if someone is having some personal issues, or they need some help in their classroom with a behavior, or if they're out sick, you have more capacity if you're organized better. And this helps build trust with your team, and it helps strengthen your relationships among your colleagues. So we'll illustrate some ways to do this. One way, a lot of you probably already do some of these, but you can have organized bins. Sometimes people do daily bins. You can even have miscellaneous professional, reading, math. I have tabs listed on my computer in specific ways that make sense for me. I know that Shannon has like a morning meeting tab or morning routine tab where she has specifics listed. So whatever works for you, please organize your bookmarks however you see fit. It's just so important and so helpful to just spend 1 minute or 2 minutes doing it versus 10, 15 finding all these sites. And this is another way at the bottom that we showed you can organize by subject bins too, if that's easier for you. So whichever works for you, but it's just easy to just grab, and then you can focus on reading your lesson or helping a colleague or focusing on other matters versus self-management.
And I just kind of wanted to add on too, and I know some in the other session asked how you can do that. So once you bookmark certain tabs, if you right click it and see add folder, you can kind of title that folder. So like Glenda was mentioning, I have a morning meeting folder, and I actually kind of have it in the order that I'll need it into. And I always forget my attendance. It's the second thing there, but I always forget it. But it's kind of helpful to put in the order that you'll use it as well.
And this is my team's planning documents. I clipped a few screenshots of them, so please feel free to explore on the last few slides that we have linked. I linked our entire planning document, so if you want to take a peek at how we plan. So the slide closest to on the left side is just our general springboard. It has all of our standard documents, all of our measurement topics. So it's really, this is just where we take everything from. So it's nice that it's in one place. We also have our planning calendar, which is in the same document, and our team inputs reminders. We're a very large team. We have 6 classroom teachers and 3 other teachers working with us. So our planning is 9-10 people with our specialists. So it's helpful to have one landing space for everyone to write. I write our agenda. People will add to it if they have something to discuss, reminders, grades. And then behind there is a grading document that we keep, that we maintain with our rubrics and our standards. And it's so important to have that high trust, because when you have that high trust, you can give feedback more openly and have that accountability as a team. So we decided last week that one of our rubrics, the standard we picked, we weren't so sure, is that the best reflection of their knowledge with that standard given this activity? And then we reevaluated and recreated the rubric. We threw out the old one. So it's really lovely to be able to establish that trust and keep establishing it with your team, because then you have a more effective planning time with more ability to give constructive feedback and improve your practice.
And so these are just kind of examples too. So I teach 5th grade, I teach grade level Eureka and grade level reading. So I teach the benchmark curriculum, whereas I have 2 other teammates who teach the grade level math, but teach the ELC curriculum. So it's a lot of different contents that we're teaching within our team. And so something that we found helpful was just kind of like having a calendar of each of our subjects. So this is just a screenshot of what our Eureka calendar looks like, our days of instruction. We have different things linked up what we'll need, lesson overview, page numbers. So it's really helpful for us, those of us who teach the grade level, to kind of just refer to this document. And for benchmark, for those of you who teach benchmark, you know that it's like 3 mini lessons a day, and it's kind of a lot to get through. And so what we have started doing this year was creating that same idea of the calendar, titling our lessons and even the order that we'll probably do it in, because sometimes we like to do the reading lessons first and then the writing at the end. But we will also link and include any follow-ups. So by linking the follow-ups, it's accessible for all of our team members, but also our ESOL, our special ed, our resource teachers, so they all have access to this as well. And if our ESOL teacher, or excuse me, our ELD teacher, if she prefers to kind of have that printed for the students, it's linked there, so she can either print it, we can assign it on Canvas. There's a lot of different ways to deliver the assessment, but it's all there accessible for us to refer to.
And the idea is, when you establish that trust, you can better utilize your colleagues, and you have so much to bring to the table, literally and figuratively, in planning. So it's so helpful to have these shared documents, however it works for your team. So that way you can work smarter and not harder. And it's really just such a more beneficial curricular experience. And it's more positive and less stressful for your children.
All right, so that leads me into the mindfulness space section. So I will be talking about how to set up and maintain your mindfulness space. But I figured while we're starting this, I kind of wanted to take a quick moment for ourselves to do a breathing meditation. This is from Peloton. If you have Peloton, I do a lot of the meditation on there. And although I won't be able to get through all the 5 minutes of it, maybe just kind of getting that beginning in. And also, if you need to maybe take a quick break, you can definitely do so. So I'll play the first 5 minutes, or I'm sorry, the first 2 minutes of this, and then we'll kind of get into the mindfulness.
Hi, and welcome to Peloton Meditation. My name is Aditi, and we are here for a 5-minute relaxing meditation. Take a moment and set up your seat, and close your eyes if you're comfortable with that. Take a big breath in to get started, and a long breath out. Again, like that, take a big breath in, let the belly rise, and a long breath out. Feel on your breath out that there is a little space to let go. We'll be moving through the body, doing our best to soften and release. If it's helpful, you might bring to mind the image of ice melting into water. And as we move through, you'll remain still, but just let your mind move to that part of your body. And we'll start with the right hand, the fingers, the palm, and the wrist. Move up through the forearm to the elbow, to the upper arm and the shoulder. Let the whole right arm release and relax. And then we'll move to the left hand, the fingers and the palm and the wrist, the left forearm and elbow.
I'm just going to pause it there. As great as it is, I know we're kind of short on time too, but I wanted to use that as a way for us to kind of, or to lead into what is mindfulness. So mindfulness is really just kind of acknowledging how you're feeling, recognizing how you're feeling, and then kind of stepping back and taking that time for you. Your mind, your attention, everything is focused to you. And so when we're talking about mindfulness, why should we teach it? And first and foremost, our students. We teach it for our students. Our students are stressed. There is a lot that they have on their plates. Even as young as kindergarten and first grade, there's a lot that is kind of asked of them, whether it's instruction-wise or things that they're doing outside of school. It's a lot. And so I included this fact here. According to the NIH, 1 in 8 children in the US suffer from anxiety disorder. And teaching this mindfulness at such an early age can be very beneficial for them as they continue to grow up, to really focus again on themselves and how they're feeling and what they can do about that. Second, us. We are stressed. We do so much inside of the classrooms, outside of the classrooms, before school hours, after school hours, during our breaks, during our plans. There's a lot that we do as teachers, and it can be very stressful. And so this other fact that I just included in here is that more than 75% of teachers' health problems are due to stress. And so really taking that time to teach mindfulness based is beneficial for our students and beneficial for us as well. And so I wanted to give you all about a minute or so to kind of read this quote here. And in the chat, I would love for you to kind of type in or share like takeaways, what really stuck out to you. How are you feeling after reading this? And so I'll give you all about a minute or so to kind of read this. And then in the chat, again, if you wouldn't mind sharing your takeaways. So I hope you've had enough time to kind of read through that. I know when I read this, something that really stuck out to me was there's less time for play, and then there's more academic pressure. I think back to when I was in kindergarten alone, and it was really just, first off, it was half day learning in kindergarten when I was in elementary school. It was a lot of play, it was a lot of kitchen, it was a lot of just playtime. And that nowadays in kindergarten too, we're teaching instruction day one or week one, and there's a lot of pressure on our students when it comes to academics. And I know I have a lot of students who do soccer, who do a lot of sports outside, who have a lot of things going on, and they tell me how they might not have time for this or might not have time for that. So there's a lot of pressure on our students, and really just thinking about the importance of just having fun, playing, and letting them know that it's okay. They're also going through and are currently in a pandemic. And that's really hard on our kids to have to kind of, go through a lot of change, especially these past few years. So I thank you all so much for also sharing in the chat. It's very shocking, and it's kind of heartbreaking too, of how much our students go through. And again, connecting it back to just giving them the space and just teaching them how to accept and see how they're feeling. And so a lot of reasons as to why we are creating a space, of course, is to increase their focus, their attention, but to decrease those levels of anxieties and stress that they might be having, which could lead to that behavior that sometimes we see. It's really important to think as teachers when a student, is having, a moment or their moments, the reasoning behind it. And sometimes, we as teachers, we also kind of feel very frustrated and stressed in that moment, but kind of thinking back to, okay, there's a reason why for this. And so again, developing that understanding, their awareness of themselves and that their emotions. So this was another slide that I just included of all the other things that are helpful when we're being mindful and what can come from it. It's really important. It's really important to set up that expectation. So when you're introducing your mindfulness space, whether it's tools that you might have, maybe showing one tool at a time, one different strategy that they can use. I know in the younger grade levels, it might be more of role playing, whereas in the upper grade levels, it might just kind of be you showing them how to use it. But set that expectation up. Let them know that it is okay to use that space. Encourage them to use it. I know sometimes even right here at my desk, my mindfulness space is right next to my desk, but sometimes when technology is not working for me that day, I might even have a moment and show them that I need to do my deep breathing. So it's okay to also use it too, and show them as teachers that we can use that space. So some of the things that I have included in my mindfulness space, rules, of course, is treating yourself with kindness, choice boards. If you have a choice board, just make sure that the choices are accessible for your students. And again, the different breathing boards that I have that are also shared on the announcements by our counselors. And since with my mindfulness right by my desk, I see students, even as they're waiting for me to check their exit ticket, they just have their finger along the breathing board. But it's little moments like that that are available for the students to just focus in on themselves. Here are just some different examples of the mindfulness spaces that we have between Shannon, Glendon, and myself. As you can see, my beanbag, they're flat. They are not actual chairs, but my students love it. They get actually really excited to sit on one of the beanbags. So it doesn't need to be something over the top, just something there, a space for your students to have. So we have to remember that as we're trying to build these positive relationships with our students, we can't do that when we're running on E. We have to focus and give time to ourselves too, so that we can better give to our students. Because like the quote says here, when you get so stressed that your stress starts stressing you out to the point where you're too stressed to deal with your stress, it's a lot. So please take care of yourselves, especially as, we're still navigating all that, as teaching in the pandemic. Please just make sure to take care of yourselves. I know that was a little quick, but I know, Shannon, you wanted to touch on a little bit about beliefs before we kind of wrap up.
Yeah, so we're going to wrap it up, but what you believe in it really colors everything that you do with your students. So believing in the goodness and dignity of every child and yourself will go such a long way. So this was just a good slide to remind you of the goodness in every child. And then that last part is to remember to have fun with them, because Sylvia said, that we are so stressed, and Glenda said, we have so many things that are calling on our attention, but it's up to us to set the tone in our classrooms and to remember to have fun.
So I low-key love the show. And so I really am hoping that you're not feeling like on the left where this wasn't helpful at all, but you're feeling more on the right and that you're excited to, and that there's something that you were able to take away. So I did create this palette. If you're able to, we would all love if you can either scan, or I just typed it in the chat, just some takeaways. So hopefully, again, you're feeling more like Moira on the right. It's exciting. I'm ready. Something that you can kind of take from this PLC camp. And what I'm also going to include in the chat is the evaluation link. That's for PLC. And then the first palette is more so for Glenn and Shannon and I. So we would really appreciate you taking the time to do both, if you don't mind. And again, we cannot thank you enough for taking time out of your PD on Monday and joining us here for this 45-minute. I feel like it went by really fast. But we're so grateful for each and every one of you. Again, your students, your school, so lucky to have you, and we truly appreciate you taking the time to come.
I also added the slides again for anyone who missed them. And please know that every resource we shared with you today is linked on the last 2 slides of the presentation. So anything you want, please grab it and use it. We're so grateful to have you and your time today.
Thank you all so much again. And here's to making it through. We got this.
Yeah, since we're wrapping up PLC camp, I believe they also would like us to do the evaluation a second time in terms of the whole event today. So I think one of the first questions is event or presentation.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all so much.